Hey, what is up, everybody, and welcome back to Mile Higher Podcast. This is episode 360. I'm your host, Josh, and Kendall is not here. Very sorry. She couldn't make it today, but we've got a very, very interesting episode for you nonetheless. We're going to be covering the suspicious death of Maria Cruz, although I think by the end of this, you may think this is just a full-blown murder that happened here, as well as a man named Dean Faiello, who is going to make you question every medical professional who claims they're a medical professional going forward, I think. This guy manipulated and lied his way to the top, and subsequently someone died because of his lies. And this case is a crazy one, so buckle up. But Ian and Janelle are here with me. Of course, I'm not actually totally alone. That'd be a little sad for me, I think. I can't even remember the last time I've done Mile Higher totally alone.
Have you ever done that?
I don't think so. No. I think I've only done that on Lights Out, but not here on Mile Higher. I'm never alone.
Today's the day.
Goodbye.
They're gonna they're gonna leave me all alone. But yeah, let's just go ahead and get right into things here, because this case is got lots of twists and turns. But let's start by talking about Maria Cruz. So it was Sunday, April 13th, 2003, and it was a perfect spring day in Manhattan, New York. Low morning temperatures reached the 60s, and there wasn't a cloud in the sky. And that's when 35-year-old Maria Cruz walked out of her luxury high-rise apartment building over there on West 50th Street. She was petite, only 4 feet 11 and 90 pounds, and constant workouts at her local gym and daily jogs around Central Park had made her look 10 years younger. A beautiful woman. And while much isn't known about Maria's early life, we know that she grew up in the Philippines and was the youngest of 7 siblings. Maria was earnest and industrious, working her way through Manila's Maryknoll College and graduating cum laude with a communications degree, actually. And in 1992, she moved to the Big Apple, New York City, and enrolled at Fordham University, eventually receiving her master's degree with honors. So a very, very smart woman as well. And following graduation, she took a job as a financial analyst at Citibank before she and a team of fellow employees were moved to Barclays Capital in 2001. And while working there, she served as a senior credit analyst. Maria lived alone in a tidy West Side apartment, and she never missed work. And she always attended Mass daily at St. Malachi's Church on 49th Street. But Maria had always been a devout Catholic and even dormed at St. Malachi's for her first few years in the city. Ex-roommates described her as quiet, shy, but very kind. But Maria wasn't all alone in the city. She had an aunt who lived in New Jersey along with her uncle, Jose Navarro, and their 3 sons who lived a short subway ride away over there in Queens. She still kept in contact, though, with her immediate family back in the Philippines, and she had been working with her siblings to plan a huge celebration for her parents' 50th wedding anniversary and had been figuring out a Christmas trip back home to the Philippines, which would have been her first trip home since arriving in New York 11 years earlier. Plus, Maria had personal goals. She planned to return to school for an additional advanced degree, and her yearly salary of $200,000 ensured she was very comfortable in the city. For many around her, Maria was, quote, one more immigrant success story in a city teeming with them. However, that Palm Sunday was different. Maria went to St. Malachi's Church at around 11 a.m. A friend had glimpsed her in a large crowd listening to Mass, and though she didn't approach, as both were deep in worship. But after the service, Maria headed back to her Park Avenue office to retrieve papers for a meeting scheduled for the following Monday. She bid farewell to the doorman, and it was the last time that anyone would see Maria Cruz. That next day, April 14th, Maria's boss, Hans Christensen, was the first to notice that she wasn't at her desk. Very unlike Maria. In the 2 years that she had been working at Barclays, Maria had never once missed a day without informing him or at least one of her coworkers that she'd be gone. Hans called her apartment and had her coworkers do the same, but no one answered. The next day, Hans told her coworkers to go and check for themselves. Unaware that Maria had moved to West 50th, a coworker checked an old address only to find that someone else had lived there. Hans called Barclays' HR department to get a list of Maria's emergency contact numbers. Then on Wednesday, another coworker went to Maria's apartment to find that 3 days' worth of the Wall Street Journal was sitting at her door. Maria was known to read the Wall Street Journal every day, and they were just piling up outside of her door. Finally, Hans called Maria's emergency contact number, her aunt. who lived in New Jersey, if you remember. She then alerted her sons in Queens to go and check on Maria's apartment themselves. However, after finally arriving in the afternoon, the building manager turned the three men away. They then went to the local police station and returned to the building with two policewomen. The group was finally allowed entry into Maria's unit, apartment 14A. And inside, they found the apartment pretty tidy. Her bed was made and clothes were put away neatly. The only things out of place were a bunch of grapes left out on the kitchen counter and a few dishes that had been piling up in the sink, as if she had just left her apartment like it was any other normal day. And then on Friday morning, her family began calling hospitals across Manhattan to ask if they had admitted anyone named Maria Cruz, assuming that she may have had an accident or some kind of a medical emergency and hadn't been able to call anyone before disappearing. When night came and no one had any information regarding her whereabouts, her uncle Jose went to the NYPD's Midtown North Precinct and filed a missing persons report. However, this was New York, and Maria was one of 18,400 people who had been reported missing in the first 5 months of 2003 alone. The majority of these cases ended up being runaways, and an early police theory maintained that Maria had met a guy, fallen in love, and then took off with him without telling anyone, which seems like a kind of jumping to conclusions here a little bit. Doesn't really necessarily fit Maria, and of course this upset her family. She had been planning her parents' anniversary celebration, was planning to go home for the first time in 11 years, and was going back to school for an advanced degree, if you remember, for her very professional job. So why on earth would she just up and leave with some dude and not tell anyone, including her family? Makes no sense, right? And why would she leave that all behind on Palm Sunday for this guy, this mystery guy that no one had ever heard about? So none of this is adding up for her family whatsoever. Probably some frustration there at the police for just assuming that this was what was going on. So her family began distributing flyers across the city and calling reporters in order to get anyone to pick up her story. Her uncle Jose would pick a new street in Manhattan every day and spend sunup to sundown putting up flyers on every block. Her siblings back in the Philippines created a website called Maria Cruz Missing, where they posted heartfelt letters and tributes, hoping that someone would read it and then remember something. However, months later, two NYPD detectives were investigating a laser specialist who may have been impersonating a licensed doctor, and they discovered that Maria had been seeing him for a mouth condition called black tongue. However, newer reports suggest that she was actually seeking treatment for scarring on her thighs. But the detectives received a warrant to search Maria's email account and bank statements for April 13, 2003. And what they discovered is that she initially had an appointment scheduled that prior Friday, but had to reschedule due to a meeting running long at Barclays, and they rescheduled for that Palm Sunday after Mass. And the laser specialist requested that she pay $400 in cash for the treatment she would receive. And after looking through her bank records, the detectives were able to piece together that Maria pulled out $400 from an upscale mall near her work before she used her credit card at Grand Central Terminal. When she arrived at 16th Street in the Chelsea neighborhood earlier than expected, she stopped by Lohman's department store on 7th Avenue and bought a new blouse and a pair of shoes. Then she walked to an appointment at an unassuming apartment a few blocks away, and that's when all her activity stopped. And at this point in time, if we remember, cosmetic procedures were at an all-time high. And of course, this is New York, so a very popular thing there. And New York was one of several states that didn't require laser technicians to actually be licensed medical professionals. And because of this lax legislation, there wasn't much the state could do to crack down on technicians who crossed the line from hair removal to minor, potentially dangerous surgeries, which seems a little weird. This was laser technology, especially, was really starting to hit the scene. And so I think the legislation just couldn't catch up with the technological advances happening in the medical industry at the time. And so there was periods of time where anybody could just operate these laser devices. But amidst Maria's disappearance, investigators turned their eyes to the fraudulent laser technician whom she had been visiting regularly for treatment in the years leading up to her disappearance. And what's worse is that this particular technician had been known to the district attorney's office since at least 1998. And this man's name was Dean Faiello. So who is this guy? Who is Dean? On the surface, he appeared to be everything you might want from a laser technician. He's very attractive, he's tall, he's broad-shouldered, he's charming, he's well-groomed. His website stated that he had trained hundreds of physicians in laser technology, and his patients often mentioned his receptionist who spoke with a French accent, as a sign, which he clearly was like a planned move, right? Made his whole practice seem very sophisticated. Dean's old friend Mark Ritchie said, quote, "He always had a crisp white lab coat on, groomed and bathed, cologne, very professional. He came across as a real-life Dr. McDreamy, but of course this was all a front." So Mr. Dean, well, let's talk about him. So Mr. Dean was born on August 31st, 1959, and he grew up in a middle-class suburb of Madison, which is one of those New Jersey suburbs where, quote, everyone was beautiful. Dean was a decent skier, and he was an exceptional student in high school, eventually becoming the president of the National Honor Society. Dean's parents got divorced, and afterwards, Dean came out to them as gay, and he became estranged from his father and grew even closer to his mother after that, who stayed in New Jersey for the rest of her life. In high school, the high-achieving Dean was voted most likely to succeed, and eventually he enrolled at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in upstate New York, seeking an engineering degree. His skin clinics boasted that he had a civil engineering degree, but this would be the first of many, many lies of his. He actually dropped out after 5 semesters, citing that the workload and constant partying he had become accustomed to after the sun went down. So really, he went to college and just was like, I'd rather party than study, and flunked out of school. But Dean left school, returned to live with his mother, worked construction, and became a fixture at Manhattan's gay clubs in the early 1980s. And the club scene, especially the gay club scene, was popping during this time. This was a probably peak clubbing time for this scene. But many of the men were young, successful, and very excited to meet new faces in the community.
So one of the first people that Dean actually met when he went to New York was a man by the name of Christopher Buchek. They first met in 1982 when they were both in their early 20s. And Christopher said, "I was one of a long line of people who were obsessed with Dean, who was someone unobtainable that I wanted very, very badly." He went on to describe this obsession with Dean in a similar way to others who had interacted with him throughout the years. Christopher said, "If you break down everything that's attractive about Dean, there's lots of things. Good looking, very charismatic, very charming, great voice. Honestly, great in bed.
Period.
But all those things don't add up to the power he has over people. The real thing that drew people to Dean was that soft-spoken manner. He knew what to say and what not to say. He was an expert at creating infatuation. For years, he just kept circling around in my bloodstream like a virus." Christopher said that Dean never disclosed his secrets, but hinted at his end goal within the gay community. Christopher said, "At the time in gay circles in New York, there was something called the Gay 500. It was kind of the informal A-list, the 500 guys who were the most successful, the richest, the ones who got invited to all the openings and the best parties. His sole ambition in life was to be one of those guys." Christopher and Dean then dated on and off for a while, but the closer he got to Dean, the more he realized that there wasn't really much beneath the surface. Christopher said, "He knew how to make you feel you wanted to get to the essence of him, but Dean has no interior life. I finally figured that out." So really at this point, he's kind of realizing that Dean is just a pretty face. Not much else going on down there. Throughout the 80s, Dean continued bouncing from boyfriend to boyfriend, taking the odd construction job to make money, and even started his own contracting company. While some sources state that it took him a while to buy his own home, according to Vanity Fair, Dean had saved up enough money from his contracting jobs to purchase a fixer-upper on Elwood Avenue in Newark, New Jersey. The neighborhood was safe, filled with historic homes, and, most importantly to Dean, only a 20-minute ride to Manhattan. Now, the house had certainly seen better days, but still it was striking. 3 stories tall with a high wrought iron fence, the house was originally occupied by Maria Juritsa in the 1920s, who at the time was an internationally famous opera singer. It even had a guest apartment over the garage, which Dean regularly rented out through the years to make extra cash.
Yeah, well, this was like a fixer-upper too.
Right.
And so Dean, he's got the construction skills, so he went in there and fixed it up. And I think his friend Mark maybe helped do the interior design on it. And it's kind of collaborative effort with him and his buddies to try to restore it to the good old days.
It really is like when you look at, all the photos we see are either like boarded up and terrible or whatever.
Yeah.
But even just it really is beautiful. It's like so crazy. And then in the documentaries, they were showing, what it looked like when they finally did fix it up. And Like, that seems like the place to be, honestly.
Yeah. Well, they had the pictures they said the holidays there were
Crazy.
magical.
Right.
You know, it was like the McAllister house on Christmas, you know, it's kind of that vibe. It's interesting too, because as we go further into this story, Dean seems to want more, especially more money, but yet he was a pretty good contractor. You know, he was very talented and seemed to just have those natural skills to be in construction, and you can do really well in construction,
right?
Especially if you start your own business or something like that. So it's interesting as we go further into this that Dean sort of just decides to abandon construction altogether.
Right. It's like the one thing he actually was really good at.
Yeah.
Like genuinely knew how to do.
Right. Qualified to do.
Yeah, qualified to do.
Big thanks to Hungry Root for sponsoring today's episode. Kendall and I are huge fans of Hungry Root. We actually are paying subscribers. We pick out meals every single week. Usually do 3 dinners. We do a lunch in there and occasionally some snacks. And it just has saved us so much time, effort, and even money with meal planning at home. You know, with a toddler, with a busy schedule at work, it is just, we don't have time to go grocery shopping. We don't have time to plan out the meals. We need help. Hungry Root comes in clutch every week, giving us tons of different variety when it comes to meals. We have some of our favorites now that we rotate on a weekly basis. We're a huge fan of pretty much all of the salmon recipes over at Hungry Root. Just recently this week, we actually had the lemon pepper half chicken recipe. So it's sous vide chicken that you basically just pop into the oven, and 20 minutes later, you've got delicious lemon pepper chicken. You've got delicious potatoes, and you've got asparagus on the table, and the cleanup is a breeze. There's virtually no mess. There's not a bunch of dishes that you've got to do, and you've got this delicious, nutritious meal on the table for your family. And I gotta say, we love that recipe. We also love the lavash wraps. There's like Caesar salad wraps with this chili limon chicken, and it is so good. We get that almost every single week for a lunch, and we absolutely love it. Plus, there's kids meals for those picky kids out there. So if you get like a taco bowl recipe, you can actually just get plain rice, plain ground beef for your kid as well. And there's tons of great snacks on there. So no matter if you're gluten-free, you're dairy-free, or you want high protein, or you're focused on gut health, Hungry Root can help you stay on track. And if you go to the Hungry Root website, if you take their quick quiz, their smart cart technology builds a weekly menu that fits your needs. So it's like having a personal meal planner who just gets it. Hungry Root also holds its ingredients to high standards, avoiding over 200 additives like high fructose corn syrup, preservatives, and artificial sweeteners. They use quality ingredients like hormone and antibiotic-free meat and seafood, organic produce, and non-GMO choices. So you always feel good about what you're eating, and I really appreciate that about Hungry Root. I've also been introduced to tons of new brands thanks to Hungry Root. You can also just buy groceries and make your own meals if you want to. It's really the one-stop shop for all things food for your family. You should definitely check it out and take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/milehigher and make sure you use code milehigher. That's hungryroot.com/milehigher, code milehigher to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/milehigher, use code milehigher.
In the late 1980s, Dean's hard partying lifestyle ended when he was contracted to do some work at The Beach, a high-end spa located on the historic Christopher Street. Christopher Street in New York, that's where like the Stonewall Inn is. Like, it's very historic specifically to the gay community. And here, Dean met his longtime friend, Mark Ritchie, who was a hairdresser at the time and worked for the owner, Michael Hart. Mark, who was entranced by Dean's physique, turned to Michael and said, "Who is that?" To which Michael responded, "That's my boyfriend." Michael and Dean became involved almost immediately, and Dean was inducted into the Gay 500. Michael himself was a reformed drug addict and ex-dealer who forced Dean to stop doing drugs, get rid of all the liquor in his Newark home, and go to AA meetings religiously. Mark said he was a totally different person with Michael Hart because Michael cracked the whip. As the two became more involved, they split their time between Michael's swanky Manhattan apartment and Dean's Newark mansion. In between, they went to parties in the Hamptons, Broadway show premieres, and upscale dinners with hard-to-get reservations. Michael convinced Dean that he could make more money working at the beach than on contracting gigs. So Dean became a body waxer and took classes to become a laser hair removal technician as the technology was becoming popular among New York's upper crust. Dean became proficient with laser work for hair removal using a fountain pen-sized laser to burn hair down to their follicles, a feeling customers described as, quote, a rubber band being snapped against your skin. And I think it's important to mention here that he was proficient at hair removal specifically.
Yeah.
That's it. He was good at that, but that's not all he did, of course.
Even that, though, I feel like you got to be careful.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, have you had it done?
No, I kind of want to, but
Kendall's had laser hair removal.
yeah, you have to be careful because I think you can burn
Totally.
people really
Well, it
easily.
smells like burning hair when they're doing it.
I know that electrolysis is different than laser because I know someone who's had electrolysis too, and that's like per follicle they like go in and like treat it. I don't know exactly, but either way, yeah, I think you got to be really careful with that stuff.
Oh, electrolysis is the only FDA approved method for permanent hair removal.
But,
it uses a fine probe electrical current to destroy the hair follicle.
Yeah, but I guess the person I know who did it said it didn't work as well as laser. This is
Interesting.
really random now, but yeah, you got to be careful.
Yeah.
Especially on certain areas.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, where people usually get laser hair removal is in very sensitive areas.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it can be for sure. Or like your face even. That's very common, especially with people with PCOS. So
What's PCOS?
Polycystic ovarian syndrome. It's I don't want to speak too much on it, but one of the symptoms is hair growth in like unwanted areas for females. So a lot of times people with PCOS will get like hair removal on their face and stuff. So yeah, man, you got to be careful with that shit.
Well, Dean was not careful. He specifically practiced on himself, burning off all the hair on his body except for his lower left leg.
Which I guess is like, all right, dude, at least you're practicing.
You practice
on
it
yourself.
Yeah, you're the guinea pig.
Yeah.
Old friends like Chris Buchek were a little scared by this, saying, his look got a little creepier as time went on. He just looked plucked to me.
Like a raw chicken.
Yeah.
A hairless cat.
I don't know. It's crazy because, you see he's always got the 5 o'clock shadow still, but I guess we're not seeing those body shots.
Yeah.
But Dean had settled into his new career and lifestyle, which of course was extremely expensive. However, this all changed in the mid-1990s when Michael Hart was diagnosed with AIDS, and that was progressing rapidly within his body. Dean had gotten HIV, but luckily it never progressed to AIDS. Getting extremely sick and knowing he was about to die, Michael moved to Florida to be with family in his final days. While recently, Dean spoke about how much Michael's passing impacted his life, to his friends at the time, Dean seemed to move on rather quickly. By the time Michael died in November 1995, Dean had already had a new boyfriend. Mark said, when Michael lay dying down in Florida, Dean was already running around on him. He doesn't care about anyone.
But Michael's death was really hard on Dean. And I think it may have impacted him more than we even know. Psychologically, I think it really just hit really hard, and he didn't really know how to deal with it, as we'll see with his actions going forward. But Dean tried to strike out on his own outside of the beach and got a job as a laser technician at Soho Skin and Laser Dermatology, which was located in Lower Manhattan. Dermatologist Lori Pullis ran the spa and said that Dean did not work for her directly. He was an independent electrologist who was working out of the Soho Medical Group while she was a licensed dermatologist. However, Lori initially liked the young man. Dean would help her out between patients, free of charge, and she introduced him to laser skin resurfacing, which involved using a much more powerful laser to remove tattoos, warts, and moles. Lori made sure to point out how dangerous this laser could be and compared it to, quote, having a gun in your hands. Plus, the minor surgeries like mole removal necessitated that the laser operator be a licensed doctor, since biopsies would have to be performed on these removed moles to make sure that they weren't cancerous. However, aside from introducing Dean to skin resurfacing, the Soho Group put Dean in contact with a new, higher-end clientele, including Mel Gibson, Madonna, and even Drew Barrymore. His new boyfriend, Broadway performer Jason Opsahl, introduced Dean to a slew of other celebrities and black tie parties. Plus, without Michael's influence, Dean was back using copious amounts of drugs and alcohol. While he and his friends had always done party drugs together, Dean had been into harder stuff like cocaine, and his new job had put him onto even stronger narcotics. Because in the late 90s, Dean was introduced to a narcotic called Stattle, which is a potent painkiller that is taken by a spray pump up your nose. 2 milligrams are equal to 10 milligrams of morphine, which I had never heard of Stattle before, but sounds very, very potent.
Apparently, it's so potent that like you're really only supposed to use those small bottles following, like, you know, a pretty painful procedure like laser skin resurfacing, and then you're never supposed to touch it again. Like, it's really
Extremely
strong,
addictive.
extremely addictive.
Dean quickly made a habit of having the real doctors within the Soho Medical Group prescribe Stattle to his patients, and then when they were drowsy after using the drug, he would steal it from them, which is just wild. Dean's friends who knew about his habit said that he could easily clear out a bottle within a day. And mind you, a typical Stattle prescription is supposed to last 3 to 7 days, so he's just going ham with it. Which it's going to make you feel really high, out of it, loopy. And so he obviously became addicted to the substance and the feeling pretty quickly if he's doing a bottle a day. But this wasn't the only new addition in Dean's life. Dr. Pullis, who had grown to like Dean quite a bit, was shocked to learn that Dean had developed AIDS and had decided to move to Florida to be with his family in his final days, which very similar to the death of his ex, Michael Hart, if you remember. Dr. Pullis and everyone else in the office was extremely heartbroken to hear about Dean's situation, and they threw him a massive goodbye party before he supposedly left for Florida. However, Dean's family was still in New Jersey, and of course, as we know, his HIV status never progressed to AIDS, but Dr. Pullis didn't know this. At least she didn't know this at first. A few months after she said goodbye to Dean, she received a flyer for a new laser skin clinic called Skinovations, run by none other than self-proclaimed Dr. Dean Faiello. And knowing that there was no way Dean had become a doctor already, or a specialist at that, since they said their goodbyes, Dr. Pullis called the Consumer Protection Bureau and attempted to report Dean, along with the healthcare department. And while they said they would keep him on their radar, it would take an actual customer complaint for the Bureau to do anything about it. Meanwhile, Dean was living large. Skinovations was a hit. And he imported many of his customers from Soho over to his practice, where most of them were completely unaware that the guy was a complete fraud. And for a while at Skinovations, Dean seemed to be living the life he'd always dreamed of. He was very rich, he was successful, and he was enjoying, all the upper class benefits in New York. And he gave off this appearance of this put together, handsome man, a doctor. He runs his own business as he's approaching middle age. As you can imagine, a lot of people were very attracted to him. They're like, wow, this guy is the perfect guy. And this attracted interior designer Greg Bach, who would go on to be Dean's partner for 5 long years. But Dean and Greg officially met after Dean broke up with Jason, if you remember, the Broadway performer. But of course, Dean had been a fixture in the nightlife scene for nearly 2 decades. And so his path had crossed with Greg's numerous times. And so Greg had a crush on him for some time. But after a mutual friend introduced them, Greg said this, he was the guy for me. So many people were obsessed with Dean, he had a way of leaving you wanting more. They spent that night talking for hours, and Greg revealed to Dean that he was already seeing someone else, though it hadn't become serious. The next day, Dean sent Greg a dozen red roses, and when Greg mentioned the lawyer he was seeing again, Dean said, "Oh, I can handle a competition." As the relationship became increasingly more serious, Greg began calling Dean, quote, "my vampire," because he seemed to sleep for most of the day and party all night long. He opened the office around noon, which is pretty wild for a professional office to open at noon, worked until 8 or 9, and then the two would grab dinner and attend a show before retiring to either Greg's Manhattan apartment or Dean's New Jersey home. And Dean always was slinging that cash, baby. He always paid for dinner, shows, whatever it is, carried $2,000 in cash whenever they left. So, he's just flaunting it.
He's a baller right now.
He's a baller. Yeah, he's balling out everywhere he goes, which, is attractive to some people. Greg loved helping Dean too. He actually was helped quite a bit in decorating and restoring the Newark mansion to its 1920s glory days. The two hosted swanky parties. And, they're kind of living in this bubble, in this sort of fantasy world where no harm can be done. It's just all good vibes, right? But that was until October 1998 when suddenly Dean just up and vanished. After spending nearly every day together, Greg hadn't heard from Dean in almost 3 days. Then he got a call from Dean, who said he was staying at his sister's house in New Jersey, but he had actually been arrested and charged with forging prescriptions. And this was because Dr. Lori Pullis received a call from a third-party insurance company earlier that month asking why she was writing so many Stattle prescriptions for one patient. And Lori said, "What the fuck? I haven't issued any Stattle scripts," and asked who this patient was. And sure enough, the patient was Dean Faiello. And it turned out that when Dean had left her Soho Medical Group, he stole a prescription pad from Dr. Pullis's office and then had been using it to forge prescriptions and even forging her signature to get Stattle consistently. Of course, Dr. Pullis is pissed at this point, so she alerts the police, and Dean was handed a relatively light sentence, just 3 years probation and mandatory drug rehab, which is pretty surprising to me that you can steal a doctor's pad, prescription pad, write a bunch of prescriptions for a very addictive drug, and basically get a slap on the wrist for it.
It's also crazy to me that you can just steal a prescription pad and that's basically
That's all you need.
Yeah, that's your ticket.
Forge the signature and you're good to go.
Right.
They'll give you whatever you want.
Right. Yeah.
I feel like there's a little bit more to that today. Like they confirm sometimes with the doctor.
I hope.
Maybe not though. Maybe your local Walgreens just like, oh, looks good. All right, let's fill it. Because I feel like it'd be really easy to make counterfeit prescription pads.
Right. I can't imagine that again, this is kind of the Wild West at this point. So it is, especially in the kind of dermatology that they're all working within. So maybe it's just specific to this
dermatology
sector.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's still wild to me.
Dean stayed at an upstate clinic for 6 weeks, and Greg stood beside him the entire time. He said, "I decided to stick with him. It wasn't a hard decision for me because I loved him. You don't leave someone because they have a problem." However, the problem was that Dean had spent nearly 2 months away from work while in rehab, and the bills began to pile up. He had expensive leases on laser equipment, not to mention the mortgage on his New Jersey home, his office. So he began working a ton. Dean worked long hours and weekends to get back on his feet. But according to Greg, that's when things really started to get a whole lot worse. Greg said that began a pattern. He would work real hard for a time, but then when things were going well, he sabotages everything. The drugs start up again, which means the problems start up again. Dean's business boomed as he began offering new, even more complicated services. He took a few classes to learn these procedures, but never got an actual certification or license. In 1999, Dean's mother had a previous cancer diagnosis come back, and it was much more aggressive than before. Dean's constant working schedule meant he couldn't be by her side, so he started drinking again, and Greg suspected that he was back on Stattle. But Greg knew the relationship was unsteady and didn't want to add any additional strain. So he started on a new renovation project in Dean's home, hoping that it would bring them closer together. Then Dean's mother died, and Dean hit the drugs very hard after that. Greg would find him sleeping all day in Newark, missing days at a time at work. So he convinced Dean, maybe it's time to go back to rehab. And so he went and attended a clinic in Manhattan 3 days a week. Greg said, "I was just praying that he could stay straight. We talked about why he did drugs, why he was unhappy, and I could never find out what it was. I'm a happy person, but Dean once said he had been born unhappy."
By the way, I looked at how easy it is. It is not that easy now because if you think about it, most of prescriptions are prescribed via some type
electronically.
of... Yeah, exactly. So, when's the last time someone gave you a paper prescription?
That's true.
Never. It's been years.
Right.
And especially with controlled substances, they won't even do it. So I think it's a lot harder to do now.
Okay, that's good.
I had a paper prescription for my wisdom teeth surgery.
And
Really?
What was the
But it was
drug?
High-powered Tylenol.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm surprised. Why would they have...
Yeah, they wrote it on it. They sent me home with it. Take it to the...
Because usually they're all right, what's your pharmacy? Blah, blah, whatever, King Supers. All right, we'll call it in.
Right.
Yeah, it just seems easier to do that
So
than make your patient go all the
drop
way
it
there
off.
and drop it off.
Yeah. And I think also it's just safer. And
I've definitely had paper prescriptions for Kendall before for, more higher powered stuff.
Interesting.
And dropped it off. But I'm pretty sure that they called to verify even then.
Yeah, I'm sure they
weren't just like, oh, thank you. Here you go.
Yeah.
Have a nice day.
Half the time, back in the day when they're like writing prescriptions, you can't even read what's on it. You're like,
how do they know what's on it?
Exactly. So I think they a lot of times probably call the doctor and confirm. And also, pharmacists are allowed to like deny prescribing things if they deem it to be like unsafe or like, because sometimes doctors, I mean, they don't know medicine as well as pharmacists do. So sometimes they'll like override it.
I will also say, like, specifically with New York, it's a weird situation because there's the Dwayne Reeds, there's the CVS, like there are the larger chains, but there's also like hundreds of tiny locally owned pharmacies that, I'm sure they're good people, but I bet Dean, part of it, I mean, this is not confirmed, but I bet he was able to just kind of like fish it around to all of these other ones that were not in network.
He probably wasn't going to like Walmart pharmacy.
Right.
Especially back then. That's a good point.
If you're not using ZocDoc to book your doctor's appointments, then what are you doing? And if you're not familiar, ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare high-quality in-network doctors and click to instantly book an appointment. Kendall and I have been using ZocDoc for years, probably since they first started. And we don't book our appointments for ourselves, for our kid, any other way. We absolutely love it. It's also a great tool to find new doctors. Maybe you just moved to a new area. You don't know where the doctors are or the good ones are at. Use ZocDoc. ZocDoc will help you find a doctor for any specialty you need, even therapists, psychiatrists, to all specialties, even dentists, to oral surgeons, you name it. ZocDoc can get you connected. You just go to their website. You put in the specialty or type of doctor you're looking for, then you put in your insurance info, and then you hit put your location in, and then you hit search, and boom, you're instantly matched with a bunch of doctors who have available appointments for you. And usually you can book an appointment in just 24 to 72 hours within booking, which is great. And more often than not, you can even score same-day appointments. So say you have an urgent issue going on. Maybe I tripped and fell down the stairs, and maybe I think I broke my arm. Well, I just can pop on the ZocDoc app and actually look for urgent care and get an urgent care appointment same day and get that taken care of. It really is the best way to find appointments. We love it, and we know you will too. So stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/milehire to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/milehire. ZocDoc.com/milehire. By 2001, Dean was back doing drugs. And what's worse is he couldn't afford his house, so he told Greg he had missed several mortgage payments, and Greg lent him $6,000. But Dean still lived beyond his means, renting an additional apartment on the west side of Manhattan for $1,700 a month, which seems wild that doesn't exist anymore.
No, I mean, that's a good ass price. But still, I'm sure, like, to everyone around Dean, they're like, what the fuck are you doing, man?
And Greg, he's trying to be supportive. He's trying to be there for Dean, but he's starting to lose his shit too. He's like, what the hell, dude? What is going on here? I just gave you $6,000 for your mortgage, and now what? You have an apartment for $1,700 a month? You're not even working, dude. And for 5 whole days, Dean disappeared again. Finally, Greg spoke to him through a mutual friend, threatening to call the police, and Dean had been holed up in that new apartment on a constant drug binge. Dean thought things would improve when a doctor rented him a new office space downtown on 18th Street, which would cost less in monthly rent. This was in the summer of 2002, around the time that Maria Cruz began coming to Dean for treatments. But Greg said that Dean was getting nuttier and nuttier. He even feared that Dean had developed multiple personalities and found drug paraphernalia littered around the Newark home. Then one day, Greg heard a worker at a parking garage refer to Dean as Dr. Faiello, and he had been seeing mail addressed to Dean Faiello, MD. Greg asked him if Dean had been impersonating a doctor, and Dean just said, nah, bro. Definitely not. Greg said, the thing about an addict like Dean is that you have to hit rock bottom before they get help. When he got caught forging scripts, I thought that was rock bottom. When he fell behind on mortgage, I thought that was rock bottom. I didn't know what rock bottom was. Finally, others started suspecting that Dean was impersonating a doctor. In the summer of 2002, 3 separate investigations were ongoing in Dean's practice. New York Post and local news station UPN 9 even did a sting operation, essentially, and sent reporters undercover into Dean's office, disguised as patients. And Dr. Lori Polis also alerted the Attorney General to Dean's shenanigans. Both the Post reporter Gene McIntosh and UPN reporter Barbara Nevins-Taylor said that Dean appeared clammy, drowsy, and clearly baked out of his mind on drugs. Dean told both women he could perform cosmetic surgery, mole removal, flat out, and even said he was a doctor. We actually have a clip from the undercover journalist, because they go in there and they're baiting him hard.
You've got big time. But you don't have to bait him that hard. That's the crazy thing.
He's like, yeah, you can trust me.
2 different journalists who both simultaneously are showing up at Skinnovations, posing as patients and asking him to do things that he should not do, that he does.
I made an appointment to see Dean Faiello, and I went with an undercover photographer. He told me that he could remove a mole here and a mole here.
Are you bothered by this one over here, or
This
that one newest small right there?
Would you take that off?
If you want it.
He said that he could remove this with a laser, and he didn't say that he was going to do a biopsy. I might have had facial cancer, and he would not have diagnosed that.
At the same time, the Post's Jeannie McIntosh goes in for the same kind of treatment.
He literally just took a look at it, didn't do a biopsy, didn't ask me my medical history, didn't ask if I'd ever had it checked before or anything like that.
I don't see any medical certificates. I don't see anything like that. I asked him if he was a doctor.
Are you a doctor?
Yeah.
I still wanted to make sure I heard it right. I asked again.
But you're a doctor, so I can trust you. I don't have to worry.
He even told me where he supposedly went to medical school.
I went to University of Edison Dentistry in New Jersey.
He built a whole persona of being a medical doctor, and people bought it hook, line, and sinker.
Shame on you, Dean.
I mean,
Yeah, bro. Totally.
You can
What do you
trust
say?
me.
You went to dentist school?
Yeah, what was that? That's what I heard.
What school was that?
Something dentistry.
Dentistry. I couldn't pick up like what the exact words were, but I'm like, what?
What does that have to do with moles?
He's like, doesn't matter what kind. I went to some medical school.
Yeah. I do it all.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you need.
Mm-hmm.
So they showed the undercover footage on local news, and that's how Greg found out just how many people Dean had been lying to. A young tenant renting a room in Dean's Newark house asked Greg if Dean was a doctor and said that Dean told him he was a dermatologist. I'm just a self-proclaimed dermatologist. Meanwhile, the dude just bought some scrubs and some laser equipment and opened up shop.
Skinnovations is a really good name.
Top tier name.
Top tier name.
It's
I'll
really
give him
good.
that.
Yeah, it's not bad. Not bad.
Innovations, Skinnovations. I'd be like, sure, I'll go.
You're hot too.
Yeah, and you're hot.
Damn.
Shit, you can look at my skin.
Do you guys ever, when you see your doctors, like look for their degrees?
No,
To see
but
if
I
they have
should
it on the
now.
wall?
I really should know, honestly.
I've always done that. I don't know why, but and not necessarily because I think they're fraudulent. I'm just kind of curious, like
Yeah.
where they went to school. But now I'm thinking like that's really smart for doctors to hang their
Yeah.
credentials on the wall. It's not just like this egotistical thing. It's like,
Yeah.
no, I have proof I
Yeah.
went to school for this.
Which that doesn't like you could literally
Which
have
you could-
ChatGPT make
It's true. You could forge
that really easily.
True. Maybe it doesn't prove anything.
But still, it's a good starting.
It looks good.
Yeah, yeah. That would put me at ease. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna lie. I picked my primary care because the nurse was very good looking. I'm not gonna lie.
All right. We love that for you, Ian.
Yep, thanks, guys.
And you felt well taken care of.
I did. I mean, they solved my issue very quickly.
Mhm.
So
Was this the skin issue?
this was the skin issue.
You should have seen. You
I
should
should
have
have
gone to
seen
see
that.
him.
Yep,
Yeah.
it probably would help me.
Yeah.
Then 2 days later, Greg spent $7,500 for lawyer Margaret Shalley to represent Dean. Dean then turned himself in on charges of practicing medicine without a license, and Greg paid a $5,000 bond for his release. Greg is a real one for backing him up through all this. The next morning, Dean went back to the office, and Greg assumed that he was going to go there to pack up his belongings, but was shocked to learn that he was going there for appointments and giving treatment, even after getting bailed out. Unreal. When Dean's friends convinced him to stop practicing, he had to figure out how to settle his debts, which now reached $500,000. Greg and a financial advisor told him to sell the Newark home, which could possibly get $450,000. Dean then fell into a deeper depression, so deep that Greg had to retrieve the mail since Dean refused to even get out of bed. And this was when Greg learned that they needed an additional $100,000 to keep the debt collectors at bay in order to even sell the house. So they're like very close to being just straight up foreclosed on and kicked out, right? But Dean's New Jersey neighbors, including Mark Ritchie, who just moved down the street, hosted a potluck to raise funds for Dean's debts. He's really got great people around him that are sticking by him.
I know, which you gotta feel fucking really bad for them, because it's like, especially Greg and Mark, like, they seemed like pretty genuine people who just wanted to help out their friend, and Dean's just kind of pulling them along the whole time.
Yeah, manipulating them. Yeah, really sad.
But luckily for Dean, despite being $500,000 in the hole, the house quickly sold for $450,000 with a closing set for spring of 2003. Numerous repairs would have to be done, but Mark Ritchie and others agreed to help Dean completely free of charge. So like we were saying, they're like, they want to see Dean succeed. And his lawyer, Margaret Shalley, cut a huge plea deal with the state. Dean's prison sentence was reduced to just 6 months if he agreed to help the AG investigate 2 Manhattan doctors who had written fraudulent prescriptions for Dean's Staddle habit. And in the fall, Dean learned that his ex-boyfriend, Jason Opsel, had actually died of a heart attack and left him $85,000 since Dean had lent him some money when they were together. But, according to Jason's family, he had always meant to change that since they broke up, but just never got around to it. His brother tried to explain this to Dean, but Dean refused. Dean offered to split the money with the Opsel family, but that never happened. Still, Dean was incredibly depressed, and Greg could feel that he was slipping away. Dean wrote emails to his old friend Christopher saying he would kill himself rather than go to prison, and called himself, quote, the Great Pretender. Plus, Greg was responsible for the house's fix-up work, and his personal expenditures for Dean were now approaching $100,000. Friends told Greg not to give him any more money because, according to them, Dean had actually gone back to work, operating out of a friend's apartment on 16th Street. One of the days Dean went to work was Sunday, April 13th, 2003, the day Maria Cruz went missing. Both Mark Ritchie and Greg were actually present that day at the Newark home. After Dean returned to it, he had a small suitcase in the back of his car. He told Mark to change the locks and explained to him that it was to keep Greg out of the house because he had become a whiner. Mark allowed Dean to store some boxes, including 2 small suitcases, in his home. Weeks later, Mark smelled something foul coming from the garage, but thought that his pet Great Dane had dragged in an animal from a nearby park. On Tuesday, May 27th, Dean woke up before noon, the first time in what seemed like many years. The house was closing the next day, and he, Greg, and Mark had a ton of work to do. For one, he had Mark buy over 20 bags of concrete mix. While they needed to fix some sidewalk cracks, this seemed a bit excessive. Plus, while Mark and Greg worked throughout the house, Dean spent all day in the garage, focused on fixing one concrete slab. He refused to let either of them help him and told Greg, "Would you get out of here?" That night, after finishing the bizarre concrete job, Dean spilled a bag of pistachios and told Greg to clean them up, which is pretty fucked up. Greg snapped at him, and Dean said, "Fuck you, you fucking asshole." Greg packed up his things and left. This was the last time he actually saw Dean.
Dean's starting to unravel here.
Yeah, he's spilling pistachios and telling his boyfriend to clean them up for him. Like, after this boyfriend lent you $100,000?
Well, Dean moved into Mark's home after the house closed, which was also located in Newark. While Mark was kind and courteous at first, allowing Dean to store even more boxes in his garage, that quickly changed as Dean became the roommate from hell. Dean stayed up all night doing cocaine, and then he would sleep all day. He'd leave the house with the doors unlocked and often pilfered Mark's clothes even. Mark said at one point, "I left a note on my dresser. Dean, leave my fucking clothes alone. I come home that night and he has my jeans on." So he said, yeah, just the roommate from hell. Doesn't give a damn. Dean left the AC running all day and night, cranking an electric bill to $475 a month, 6 times more than what Mark usually paid. On August 14, 2003, Mark evicted him. He stayed for another month, then moved into an additional friend's house who also evicted him, and then went to a motel in Secaucus, New Jersey. What's important, though, is that he still left all his boxes and suitcases in Mark's garage.
Which I'm like, you big dummy.
Yeah. Yeah, he's
you
just
big dummy.
too much cocaine. He can't think clearly at all. He's just completely beside himself. I mean, he's a shell of who he once was at this point. What we'll find out later,
Big mistake.
Big mistake. But one day, Mark was restacking boxes in his garage when he heard something strange shifting around in one of the small suitcases Dean had left behind. So Mark's like, what's in here? Mark found tampons, an address book, credit cards, and a driver's license belonging to Maria Cruz. Mark said out loud, "What have you done now?" Because he's like, why on earth does he have this woman's belongings in here? So Mark called 3 numbers in the address book. On the third call, someone picked up who said that they had never heard of Maria Cruz. Assuming this to be credit card fraud or identity theft, Mark put everything away and said, I don't want to know. But for Greg, things were just getting nastier. After Dean sold the house, he paid Greg back $10,000 of the $95,000 he had sunk into the house. But when Greg kept asking for the remaining $85,000, Dean just flat out refused. While Dean was awaiting sentencing, he missed 2 court dates. Greg went and tried to track him down, fearing that he'd be on the hook since he initially bailed him out. A 3rd court appearance was scheduled for October. In late August, Dean was driving around Newark, potentially looking for a new home to buy. However, after he was caught peering into people's windows, someone called the cops. Though Dean didn't have any identification or insurance on him, he did have some white powdery substance. He was arrested and bailed out by another friend, and then in September, Mark received a call from an airline company asking if Dean would confirm his upcoming trip to Costa Rica. In September, Greg, who had lost contact with Mark and didn't know Dean's whereabouts, got a sneaking suspicion that he would also miss the October court date and jump bail. So he contacted the Attorney General's office and eventually sat down with Detective Brian Ford, who had dealt with Dean since his arrest in 1998. Detective Ford said, "Why would he leave? He hasn't done anything that bad. Maybe it was because we wanted to question him about a missing person?" Greg asked, "What missing person? Was she a client?" And Detective Ford said, "Yes. Her name was Maria Cruz." We are living in the digital age of financial scams. There's scams happening everywhere. No matter what platform you use, no matter what device you use, you got to watch out. You got to watch your back. And you need an app that's going to protect your money better than you ever will. And an app that basically replaces your wallet because it's a digital wallet. I'm talking about Cash App. Cash App is one of my favorite apps for so many reasons, but the number one reason being it secures my money. It secures the bag. And I know that my money is always safe and that it is not easy to access like my actual wallet in my pocket because you need my face in order to get into it. You need a biometric scan to get into it. So unless you're going to take my face, you're not getting into it. There's going to be a day pretty soon where I don't even carry a wallet because everything will be on my phone. My actual digital wallet's on my phone. My ID's on my phone. So the days of actually carrying a physical wallet are going to be pretty much gone here soon. Cash App also has a Cash App card now, which is connected to that digital wallet that you can use for purchases where you maybe don't want to use your phone or they don't take digital pay. And this card gives you access to a ton of perks and benefits like exclusive early access to nationwide concert pre-sales or discounts on popular brands. But you also have extra security with the power to instantly lock or unlock your card right from your phone in just one tap. Plus, if a suspicious transaction comes up, somebody uses your card or gets a hold of it or steals your card number somehow, you'll get an actual notification on your phone and Cash App will automatically decline that purchase, sending you a heads up to confirm. So that way, this actually just happened to me the other day. I was at the mall this past weekend and I was buying some clothes and my phone, my Cash App said, "No, you're not buying this." Because somebody's trying to spend $235 at this store right now, and it doesn't seem to be you because we know you, Josh. You don't go to the mall that often. So you can't possibly be at the mall buying this purchase right now. And sure enough, I was. And it was just so easy. Just a couple taps on my phone and boom, ran the transaction again. It was just so simple. Plus Cash App, you just give your handle out to people. They can send you money. It just makes things so much simpler. You don't have to write checks for people. You don't have to give people cash. You can just Cash App them. There's no easier way. So for a limited time only, new Cash App customers can use our exclusive code to earn some additional cash. For real, just download Cash App, use our exclusive referral code SECURE10 in your profile, and send $5 to a friend within 14 days, and you get $10 dropped right into your account. Terms apply. That's money. That's Cash App. Cash App is a financial services platform, not a bank. Banking services provided by Cash App's bank partners. Prepaid debit cards issued by Sutton Bank, member FDIC. Instant discounts provided by Cash App, a Block Incorporated brand. Visit cash.app/legal/podcast for full disclosures. Greg recalled that Dean had called a mutual doctor friend earlier in the spring saying that a patient had experienced a bad reaction to lidocaine. Dean said he rushed her to St. Vincent's Hospital, where she recovered. Wondering if Dean could have harmed someone, Greg called that doctor friend and asked what the conversation was about. The doctor said that during the phone call, Dean claimed that the woman had no vital signs. Stewing on this newfound information, Greg was decorating a Christmas tree for work when he remembered the strange concrete job Dean had done the day before the house closed. Did this have anything to do with Maria? Dean then wrote a letter to Detective Ford, but there was no movement. Then in January 2004, Greg learned that Dean had been writing emails to a mutual friend complaining that no one spoke English in the tropical location he was staying at, which Dean would say something like that. Greg told the woman to talk to Detective Ford, and Detective Ford resumed contact with Greg. A month later, they had a search warrant to go take a look at that concrete slab at their old home in Newark. The new owners ran to Mark's house and told him, "We were just served. Dean murdered someone and buried their body in the garage." After the detectives dug up all that concrete, they immediately smelled a strong odor coming from a suitcase that they discovered. Inside the suitcase was human remains, which were later identified through dental records as Maria Cruz. So finally, the true story of what had happened to Maria became very clear despite some differences. Dean said that he had helped Maria 12 times over the past few years, treating her black tongue condition and other skin issues. He said that on April 13th, she was looking for treatment for scarring on her legs, though other sources claimed the appointment was for the black tongue condition. Dean admitted that he was both drunk and high when Maria came into his office, and she overdosed on lidocaine and went into shock. He called the doctor friend who urged him to take her to the hospital, but Dean didn't. He said that almost automatically he packed Maria's body into a suitcase, drove home like nothing had happened, and he never even checked her pulse because he doesn't know how to check a pulse, which is wild. Dean then stored her body in Mark's garage and eventually decided to bury her in the concrete slab before the house was sold. All the while, Maria's family is constantly searching for her for months. And now that Dean was a wanted murderer, the police acted quickly to go and locate him in Costa Rica, which they assumed was his hideout location for months. In fact, the first person to chase Dean to Costa Rica was that New York Post reporter who had caught him years ago. So Mr. Dean, he spent his first few weeks in Costa Rica haunting nightclubs in the capital city of San Jose. However, the resort he was staying at was very expensive. So to avoid paying for lodging, Dean convinced the hotel manager to let him stay at his family's home free of charge. However, once he learned that investigators had discovered Maria's body, he hitched a ride to a resort in Samara, 120 miles west, and he asked to stay in the most expensive room and spend his final days drinking poolside cocktails and hitting on the pool boys. Because of course this motherfucker did. He knew that his shit, they were on to him and his time was running out.
Right. And he's like, I got the remainder of this money to blow. I'm not going to settle up any more of my debts.
He's like, fuck all that.
Right. I'm
going to prison. So, yeah.
Exactly. Let's hit the swim up bar.
But Dean, he was finally arrested by Costa Rican immigration police on February 26, 2004. Detective Brian Ford came down there to see him. And when he did, he said, "Hey, Brian, nice to see a familiar face," which is echoing a line from the movie Catch Me If You Can.
Which apparently Greg said Dean was obsessed with.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
He wanted to be a movie star, I guess.
Mm-hmm. He wanted to be Leonardo DiCaprio.
Right.
So with Dean being arrested in Costa Rica and taken into Costa Rican authorities, it took some time to get him extradited back to the U.S. Because he had convinced the Costa Rican couple with help of his lawyer to try and adopt him, even though they were younger than him.
Yep.
Which would have made him a Costa Rican citizen, therefore immune to extradition to the U.S. And he tried really, really hard to get this done because it's kind of a loophole. But ultimately, the judge down there denied the adoption because Dean was twice their age. Because what the fuck? He's like, clearly this is just to escape being held accountable for your crimes back in the U.S. So in May, Dean was finally extradited back to the U.S. and charged with second-degree murder. By December 2006, he entered into a plea agreement, pleading guilty to 1 count of first-degree assault and practicing medicine without a license, which I think second-degree murder seems more fitting for this.
I would say so, yeah.
But my guess is that maybe the authorities were worried about taking this to trial, maybe convincing a jury, although I feel like there's a very strong case here. So I wonder why they kind of went this route.
I wonder if it has anything to do with his past, because despite him constantly jumping bail and shit, he was actively for a while helping the AG investigate those other doctors who were, giving him the fraudulent prescriptions.
Right.
So maybe there was some leniency because of his past compliance.
And future cooperation and
Right.
additional investigations or something like that. So even with those charges being lowered, he still was sentenced to 20 years in prison, which I think was very fair at the very least. In court, the judge said, "Well, I see you read that statement and it rang a little hollow to me." There was also allegations that Maria's family fought the plea deal, which I don't blame them whatsoever. I mean, I think this is just such a grimy, heinous thing that he did that I'd want to see him put away for forever. There's even rumors that her sister had called Dean twice while she was missing, although this rumor is unconfirmed. But Dean, he went to prison and he became a Quaker, which is kind of interesting. Of course, found God. And while incarcerated at Attica Correctional Facility, he took writing courses offered through Cornell's prisoner education program. Said he did a lot of reading, a lot of writing, and a lot of reflecting. But in January of 2022, Dean was actually paroled after serving 18 years. He did a lengthy interview with 2020, which is the only interview of him out there, stating that he lived a quiet life after being released and worked as a janitor or maintenance person, and that he continued his classes and actually wrote a long apology to Maria's family, though it's unclear what their response was to it or if they've even seen it. It's unknown if he's contacted Greg Bach or Mark Ritchie, though he expressed interest in it during the interview. So to sum up the interview, he seems very emotionless still. Like, for somebody who's claiming that he feels remorse and regrets what he did, there's very little emotion coming from him whatsoever. There's not a tear shed. There's not even any ounce of sympathy or empathy really coming from Mr. Dean. But he's like, yeah, because they're like, would you want to, kind of square up your debts with Mark and Greg and all these people who helped you? And he's just kind of like, yeah, I'm open to that. I don't doubt they want to see me. And then, he says he wants to apologize to Maria's family, and he's, ends up reading this apology, which feels a little hollow to me. If it didn't feel, and he's, again, emotionless while reading it.
Right.
And kind of being like, oh, I just freaked out. Yeah, he never paid anybody back after he was released. And it's very clear that Greg and Mark don't want to see him whatsoever. 2 years later, in January of 2024, Dean Faiello died in a car accident at the age of 64, which is pretty crazy.
I know.
He's beginning this new life, and, he's going to try to atone for everything that he did here while he's still here on Earth. And then boom, he gets taken out. An English instructor through Cornell's program said, "What a tragic end after the seemingly joyful turn his life had finally taken." While neither Greg nor Mark have made public statements following his death, Greg said this after he was arrested in 2004. "That's the part I just can't fathom. All that time while we were filing in and out of those garages, Maria's body was there. I just don't think I'll ever get that image out of my head." And so the question remains of, was he really reformed after prison? Do you think that a person like Dean could really turn it around and sort of be rehabilitated? Was this just, Dean claims he's like, I never meant for any of this to happen, even though I think he's smart enough to know that it could have happened. I think when you're playing with medical devices and you're administering anesthetics and things like that, you probably are smart enough to understand that there's things that can go wrong here. And despite that, you did it anyway. And she went into shock. Her body started shutting down. And then at that point, I think it really comes down to the decision to not get her to help. When the hospital's 2 blocks away or whatever, he chose to sit there and try to like cover up the situation at hand.
Especially when he calls another doctor and they're like, why are you calling me? Go call 911. Then he just doesn't do it. Like, you had so many opportunities and you just basically chose to be neglectful and someone died because of it.
I mean, I really think it's just, it also points to just like how hard addiction can affect people and how like literally he's willing to not only take someone else's life and hide it, but also just fuck with everyone in his life along the way. Because it's kind of like, I mean, to me at least, it seemed like this addiction, this crazy addiction to drugs and alcohol had kind of completely disconnected him from the people who cared about him and the consequences of his like extremely fraudulent actions, to the point where he thought like, I can just go to Costa Rica and be fine.
It just doesn't make sense that unless he was really just so out of his mind high and incapacitated that he couldn't think through in that moment, man, if I call 911 and she gets picked up from my office, I'm going to be in trouble, but I'll be even in more trouble if she dies here in my office. And so the fact that he chose to just try to resuscitate her himself and then ultimately throw her in a suitcase, throw her in the back of his car, and then take her home, just doesn't make sense to me. It's just a whole other level of callous and frankly evil, Like, I think the drugs played a big part of it, but I think Dean deep down inside is not a good person and is not a good guy and has been manipulating people for years and years and years. And it just, things snowballed and escalated. It's a classic example of a criminal who starts small and then does more and more and more as time goes on, and it snowballs on them. But ultimately it was all in service of himself. It was all about Dean at the end of the day. Everybody was there to serve Dean, and it didn't matter to Dean how that affected those around him, because then he would just run. As soon as people started clamping back at him, he runs from the situation. That's what he did. And in the end, he ran to Costa Rica, and they fucking found his ass, and he got the time that he did. Should he have gotten more time? Potentially. I think he's a dangerous individual. Could he go, how do we know he's truly reformed coming out of prison? This is something I wrestle with all the time of how do we truly know one is reformed? Somebody saying, well, I'm reformed because I found God. Okay, that's great. Maybe spiritually you're reformed, but does your religious beliefs or spiritual beliefs actually reform character flaws and personality issues that you have? I'd like to know, was he in therapy throughout prison? We know that chances are probably not, or maybe here and there. But was he really reformed? I don't think so. I think this was an example of he knew he was going to go on to 2020 and he wants to make himself look as good as possible so that people don't fucking hate him. And I don't know. I don't necessarily believe it, but maybe it was. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because he's gone.
Right.
And he can't hurt anybody ever again. I can't imagine how Maria's family feels about this whole thing. What a tragedy for, she was entrusting him, thinking that he knew what he was doing, and he ultimately cost her life. And this happens, there's licensed medical professionals where patients still die due to malpractice and things like that. And this is 10 times worse because in those cases, they're licensed medical professionals and things just go wrong, or they make bad decisions, or they're intoxicated. But you hold those people accountable for what they did. But Dean is like a whole other level where he's not only killing somebody, but then he's trying to cover it up and disrespecting his victim by then putting her in a suitcase and having her decompose under his garage It's
So
just
fucking
completely
evil.
fucked up. He
Right.
should have just owned up to his mistake so that Maria's family could at least have her remains whole and, have the proper burial funeral. Instead, he let her decompose.
And the answers. They went years being like, where
Right.
the hell is our loved one? Meanwhile, she's in a fucking suitcase under a slab of concrete.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
It is horrible. And anybody that does shit like that, I have no sympathy for whatsoever. I think they're pieces of shit, quite frankly.
Straight up. That question of like, is he reformed? I really think the only people who have a say in that, would be Maria's family.
Yeah.
And, I understand why they haven't said anything about it.
What is there to say?
Right. It's like you killed our daughter. Like,
Yeah.
and so, I mean, I agree with you. Like, I found myself while watching the interview kind of being like, damn, he's really changed his life around, yada,
Yeah.
yada.
Puts on a good show.
But exactly, he puts on a good show, and he could just be the same guy he was back in the 90s and early 2000s.
Yeah, and his words ring hollow too. It's like
Right.
anybody can get on camera and say X, Y, Z, but its actions speak louder than words. So what actions has he taken? He would have already been like, I went to Maria's family and tried to give them my apology. There's other things he could have done that would convince me a little bit more. But to just go on there and in an interview and be like, yeah, da da da. No, I'm not buying it at all. I think
Because
it's
the
just-
letter he read, that was the first time he read that, right?
Right.
So like, oh, you're going to wait till you're on camera in an interview to read your letter of remorse? Dude, what the fuck?
Yeah, and it was very generic. It was very it didn't seem like very heartfelt at all. I mean, I think Dean was definitely a narcissist for sure. And who knows whatever else was going on in addition to the substance abuse. I think the substance abuse was definitely a major contributor to his downward spiral and ultimately a lot of the decisions that he made. But I think there's also this personality flaw there. There's a serious deep-rooted character issues there that he capitalized on for his own gain, which is evidenced by all of his relationships with everybody around him.
Yeah, because there's millions of people who are affected by the mental and physical illness of addiction who aren't fucking killing people.
Right.
So that's not, you can't just point to that and be like, well, that's why. No, absolutely not.
No, he wanted to do what he wanted to do and get away with it. Right. So, scumbag Dean.
I also think, the fact that he's removing all of these moles. I mean, we were talking about this before. He's removing all of these moles from all these people without doing proper biopsies. Like, we know, obviously, the horrible shit he did to Maria, but there's probably countless of other patients he's seen throughout the years who had something that he just didn't catch because he lasered it off right away, and they went on living their lives without knowing they might have like a life-threatening condition.
Yeah, they could have melanomas or something.
Right.
I mean, there's so many other things, skin conditions that are very serious that could potentially destroy one's life. And to think that Dean never even considered that fact, that it was literally a get-rich scheme. It was just, how can I make money? Fuck all these people. I don't care about them, but I'll take their money from them. And yeah, that's the worst thing. There's certain professions such as doctors that you want to be able to trust them. There's this patient trust that needs to be there for something as sensitive as your health, as one's, diagnosing someone with a serious illness or disease. And he just threw all that out the window and was like, I can charge a lot of money for this. Fuck these people, basically. So, fuck him. That's what I have to say about Dean. But let us know your thoughts. What do you think are the reasons he did all of this? Or, are we on the right track with our analysis here? Or is there something else we're missing? We want to hear from you. But that is going to be the end of our episode here today. If you enjoy the Mile Higher podcast and you want to see more, go check out our prior episodes. We got a lot of great ones out there. But we'll be back next week with a new one for you. And until then, keep on taking your mind a mile higher.